All right, I think we are live. Hello, arty peoples, and welcome to another episode of Jerry's Live. As always, I'm your host. My name is Emmy Klein, and I have the fantastic Jimmy Leslie on with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Jimmy is the resident artist and director of the Fine Arts Collective Education Program for Winsor Newton. And it's an incredible honor to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Absolutely.
Now, we'll say, yep. Sorry, before you jump in though, Jimmy does have an amazing show scheduled for us today, but if you want to check out the art supplies that he is working with, make sure to go to the website, jerrysartarama.com, and in the search bar, type in the code JL199, which is today's class, and everything that he's using should pop up. So feel free to take it away.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Emmy. I have to let everybody know here. I've done a number of these Jerry's lives, and the very first time I did one, I went and looked after the fact, and I don't know what episode it was, but it said, let's say JL50 or whatever. And my name is Jimmy Leslie, and I thought, oh, they have a special episode with my initials. And it wasn't after the fact, embarrassingly so, somebody told me, hey, it's not all about you. The JL is Jerry's Live. So it's awesome to be back here again today. As Emmy said, my name is Jimmy Leslie. So my role with Winsor and Newton, and actually its sister company, Liquitex, is that I'm the resident artist, which means a lot of different things. I get to test materials, I get to feed back to the chemist and the marketing department, get to work with them on marketing campaigns. I'm also the director of their Fine Art Collective Education Program. And that really harkens back to my background. I'm of course a painter, but I'm a former college art professor. So I run the education program in North America for the brand. And tonight we're talking about a really favorite subject of mine, is watercolor. And actually, I was trained as an oil painter back in grad school. That was my first, I always like to say that's my first love. That was my first girlfriend, was oil painting. And I still love oil. I still love acrylics. Acrylics are wonderful as well. But there's something about watercolor that to me is so intimate, because the paper or the color actually doesn't just sit on the surface. It becomes part of the surface. It's sort of married to it. And I also love just the ease and portability of watercolor. Can I take oils and hit the road? Absolutely. Can I do that with acrylics? Absolutely. Of course I can. But there's such easy setup and cleanup with watercolor that it's really lovely. And also, I love, love, love working in a sketchbook, and I cannot recommend watercolor more for that reason. Now, I have a number of things I want to and will share with you tonight, but in 1 hour, if I shared everything about watercolor that I wanted to share, it would probably be 4 hours long, and it could probably go beyond that. So, although I do have things to share with you specifically, I want you to drive the conversation, all you folks out there. I want you to ask questions. I love them. Emmy will let me know. Everybody behind the scenes will let me know, and I will do my best to answer all your questions, because I want you to walk away tonight going, I get that now. Now that makes sense to me. I want those aha moments. So, little housekeeping. I'm going to flip around with our overhead camera, and just a few shout outs here. Let's give a shout out to Jerry. So on Instagram, Jerry's Artarama, you can see what they're up to. Please go check that out. That's pretty awesome stuff on there. Then also our brand on Instagram, Winsor and Newton. Actually, the brand has actually got an ampersand in it, but it's on Instagram, it's Winsor and Newton. And then I told you I'm the director of the Fine Art Collective Education Program. So that's TFACNA. NA is for North America. So the Fine Art Collective North America. In addition to the awesome content that Jerry's has on Facebook and on Instagram, we've got about, since the start of COVID, gosh, is it a year and a half? We've got something like 45, 50 live streams on there, and about 85 mini demos. So you can check that out. And if you want to get a little more personal, come say hi to me on Instagram over at Jimmy Leslie Art. But let's get down to it. So tonight, I'm going to work with this image right here. Now, I was in, well, definitely pre-pandemic days. A few years ago, I was in San Antonio, Texas for work, for my job with Winsor and Newton. And it was probably about 10:30 at night, 11 at night. And I went out for a little walk, and I headed over to where the Alamo is. And I saw this scene, different stoplights and things like that. And I took a bunch of reference photos, a lot of them really. And one of the things that I think is important for all of you is to think about why you gravitate towards a certain subject. And when I really think back to my childhood, I can remember going on a lot of road trips with my folks, and especially either really early morning, because my dad always wanted to, like so many dads, leave at like 4 a.m. to beat the traffic, or we, drive overnight. And I can remember being in the back of this old station wagon, looking out the window and kind of squinting my eyes and seeing that kind of lens flare, that glare you would get from the tail lights of cars and the stoplights. And I think for some reason that sort of stuck with me. So I tend to deal with, not exclusively, but kind of a lot of images like that. So that's going to be our image tonight. Now I want to show you, before we get into, I'm going to work on this watercolor pad, and go into your questions. Ask me questions about color. Ask me questions about paper. Ask me questions about brushes. If you have questions about inspiration and just work as an artist, I'm an open book for you tonight. So here's my little sketch, and I want you to keep in mind, it's very, very loose. I did this ahead of time just because we don't have a lot of time tonight. And what you'll notice here is I gave myself some very basic guidelines, sort of an asterisk across there. So dividing the middle, both vertically and on the horizontal axis as well. And the reason this is so important for everyone, even just a mid mark like that, you start to get to notice where things line up. So immediately we can tell that these two lights over here sit just above that line. That line gives us that. It lets us know that. We know that here the vertical axis lines up really nicely with the front of that car and splits this diagonal light source here coming through the two shadows from the car. We get this other axis, this diagonal axis coming down, cutting through this car's taillight and hitting just the corner of the license plate there. Sort of get the opposite thing just about happening there as well. And the beauty of this is if this car is over just a touch, if this is just over just a little, well, they were like that just a few minutes ago before I took that photo and right after. So you have a little bit of leeway with things like that. You can tell this vertical axis actually splits this main street light here as well. So I'm just looking for basic things, and I put those same plot lines here and sketched out a really loose drawing here. And I'll show you before I start laying down color. This goes back to, and you can see in my sketchbooks, I'm always writing. This is actually acrylic gouache, so a different media. And this is in October 2020. I made this little sketch. And if you look in this sketchbook here, this is very, very different from a sketch I made later on in watercolor. Not too long ago, last month, May 20th, here in 2021. And you can see how I handled it in very loose acrylic in my sketchbook right here, as opposed to watercolor. I saw colors differently on different times, and that's okay. And that's kind of cool. I like that about doing little studies. And let's see a big, big, big difference. I'm going to share my screen with you now, and I want to show you this one. This is a little acrylic on canvas. Give me a thumbs up, Emmy, if you can see that. Did that pop up? Yeah, good. Thank you so much. Look at that one. I mean, so that's, I have to give a sound. It's an explosion of color, right? And you can see here with the more opaque passages of acrylic paint here, it's got a different feel. So the media you choose will have and give and can give a different feel to the work that you make. So let's dive into it. I'm going to move these across. And again, throw those questions out at any point you have them, folks. I'm happy to have them. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my palette here and share you the colors that I have. Let's go top to bottom right here. So I have very up top here, up top is these three, 1, 2, 3 right here, are what I would call the suggested primaries in the Winsor and Newton range. Now, why do I say suggested primaries? Any red, any yellow, and any blue is a primary color, right? Because we can't make them from anything else. But these are the ones I suggest to make the cleanest secondary colors. So your cleanest oranges, your cleanest violets, your cleanest greens. So if you were only going to choose 3 and go out and do some quick sketches, the ones I would choose, let's get that in focus. There we go. Permanent rose. I think you can see a little bit of it on my finger from before. I've got the artist nail polish there. A little bit of permanent rose. Then we've got our suggested yellow would be Winsor lemon. Now, I should back up here. The permanent rose is a more bluish or cooler red. And the Winsor lemon is a more greenish or cooler yellow. And a lot of times when you think about colors, I think we put, we put colors into the categories. I think if you just said to random people and said, hey, is yellow warm or to you or cool? I think people would say warm. They would think sunlight, right? They would probably think that about reds. They would think that about oranges. We tend to think of maybe snow and ice and things that are cool blues, cool violets. That's not necessarily so, though. You can have, and this is where we talk about color bias. So a color that can have a bias towards something else. So if I go back here and we look, we could say that this red has a bias towards blue. This yellow has a bias towards green. So they're cooler. And then we look at this one. This is Winsor Blue, which is a phthalocyanine color. I know, big, long, what we call a multisyllabic name. It's a lot of syllables, right? Like this is like phthalocyanine. If you nail that on Scrabble, that's it. You won. You're done. You're going to get like 48 points. So Winsor Blue is our trade name for phthalocyanine red shade. So obviously that tells you right there, it's a blue that moves towards red. So let's mix up our first colors. What I want to do is these lights are going to be such a focus for me in the I was going to say landscape, cityscape, that I want to really get those in. And I want to think about leaving those whites as the white of the page, those brights of the light. So I'm going to mix a little bit of, I'm going to take this is my very first brush I'm going to use. This is, let's roll that around. This is a pointed round. These are new to the Winsor and Newton range. They are a Professional Watercolour synthetic sable. So if you want to move away from animal hair, this is a professional brush and it's a synthetic. And I can talk a little bit more about that, but I'm going to get some color or water, I should say.
I had a question. The colors that you chose, are they more towards the like single pigment colors, or are they a variety of pigments that mix together to make?
No, that's a deep question for the first one, Emmy. That's a good one. I like that. Yeah. What Emmy's referring to, for anybody who's unaware, so permanent rose, the pigment in that is what we call quinacridone. It's, again, long name, right? Like the blue is phthalocyanine. You want to really get a mouthful? Whoa, the Winsor lemon is a benzomidazolone. Oh my gosh, these are long names. What do the long names tell you, though, without trying to confuse you? Because that's the last thing I want to do. They're synthetic. Your synthetic names tend to be the ones that are very long and, like I said, multisyllabic, as opposed to, think of an earth color: ochre, sienna, umber. Easy to say. They designate, in the case of sienna and umber, they designate places where the pigments are found. And these happen to be single pigment, meaning there's no other pigment in it. There's only one, and that helps make cleaner mixes of colors. So I've got my watercolor block here, this separate one. I'm going to use that to, although you would think I'm going to mix on the palette, I'll do some of that, but I want to show you the color I'm mixing right here. So I'm going to use a little bit. I'm going to pick up, watch this color. I want you to really see this. This comes out as just a beautiful, oh, look at that. Permanent rose. It's got a very gorgeous rosy sort of color to it, but it's more on the bluish side. Now, how do you tell that if you're looking at a color? Say, okay, so what? You said bluish side to it, or a blue bias to it, Jimmy. It looks red to me. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. But the other color I have down here, I've got 6 colors on this palette. I've got these first 3 suggested primaries. And then this is a cooler red. This one right here, which is cadmium red scarlet, is a warmer red. So it's more yellow. Let's put a little of that down and just show you these main colors I'm working with. And I think you can probably see that right away, right? That's got more blue to it. Now you can see that a little bit more. And I know if you're somebody who hasn't dealt with color a lot, again, you may say, but blue. But when we have some sort of comparison here and we go, oh yeah, that's a more yellowish, right? Because this almost moves more towards orange. So I want you, and the reason I want to show you this before I put color down is I want you to be able to see that the color that you choose can have a major impact on the mood that you set in a painting, in any piece of artwork. Let's look at a few others, and then I'm going to mix. So let's go to that next one, the Winsor lemon, right? Winsor lemon. I'm going to pull some of that off of here, really load up my brush. And I'm going to put that down. So that's a cooler yellow. A cooler yellow moves more towards green. And again, I don't expect any of you to look at that. So, oh, I see green. I see green right. No. I get it. I get it. It moves more towards that. And the reason I say that is because this other yellow that I have on my palette is what's called Winsor Lemon. And watch this. This is a warmer yellow. So remember, we just moved from a warmer, cooler to a warmer red. And then, yeah, look at that. Isn't that, that feels like a much warmer in comparison. So the other thing this shows you right away before I even get color on paper is that color is relative. Color is very relative. And let's look at the two blues. And I promise you, we're going to put color down. So here's our Winsor blue red shade. And these are experiments I would suggest you do on a scrap piece of paper or in a sketchbook. So this is red shade. And down here, this is Winsor blue or phthalo blue green shade. And I know they don't look massively different, but let's just make a little comparison here. Let's take this same color right here, our Winsor lemon, our cooler yellow, and let's drop some of that right in here. And let's look at the green that makes. And I'll pull that off to the side. I'm gonna go a little bit more with that. Yeah, and pull that off to the side. I'm going to take the same color so we don't have a variable there. The same Winsor lemon. And clean off my brush a little bit more. Pick that up. And bring that over here. And I think one of the things you can start to tell when you do that is if we look at these two greens, look at the different green we get out of here. So this is, again, our Winsor lemon with our red shade, right? And if you're trying to make a green, right, and you look at a color wheel, what's the opposite of red on your color wheel? It's green, right? So when we're mixing these two, because that blue moves towards red, it starts to kind of cancel out that green. Doesn't mean it's a bad green, but it's a more muted one. And over here, this is the phthalo blue green shade. It's already moving towards green, so it helps me make a brighter green. So I'm going to use that to lay in my lights here. So let's jump right to it.
Now, Jimmy, what was the second yellow that you had on your palette there?
That one was Winsor yellow, and that's a warmer one. So a good point to this, right? So I'm showing you, what am I showing you here? I'm showing you 6 colors, 2 sets of primaries, cool and warm red, cool and warm yellow, warm and cool blue. So that's what you would call a split primary palette. It's got 2 sets of primaries, one's cool, one's warm, and that enables you to kind of manipulate mood a little bit. So I'm going to take some of this color, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay in, let me look at what did I do with my reference photo? I do need that. That's a little bit important. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to come out to the outer edges. Make sure I'm in focus. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to come out to some of my outer edges here and just lay that green around the lights. And I'm going to let it kind of clean off my brush off to the side and sort of let that kind of fade out a little bit. So I'm just doing that. It's real simple. It's real light, right? I'm not getting too heavy right away. And your watercolors are going to tend to dry a little bit lighter anyway. So you can stand to go a little bit stronger. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to drop that in here. And I'm going to do the same thing around these. And what I notice about my photo here tends to move from a blue out to greenish in the periphery. So I am going to come back in with the blue around there. But one thing I want you to notice, even at looking, if I get really tight with this photo here, those are not perfect circles. They're not perfect circles. And a lot of times so when I sketch this out, that's the last thing I was concerned with doing, is getting these perfect little circles here, because what I wanted to do, if I have perfect circles, it's going to tend to not quite look as natural as I would like it to look. It's going to look a little bit, I don't know, a little bit stiff. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen. So I'm just going to be really relaxed with some of the marks that I make here. I'm just dropping this in the middle areas around some of these lights. Now, as I do that, I like to try to get my color down and kind of fill in everywhere to begin with. as quickly as possible. The second mix I'm going to do, and I'm going to pull this little plastic palette in here, and I'm going to take a little bit of, this is a burnt umber. It's in a pan. Now the pan and the tube colors are both professional pigments. They're both professional grade and quality paint. I'm gonna drop some right in here. So this is burnt umber. So a warmer brown. So it's really about portability. You know, a lot of times if I'm going out to paint and it's going to be, you know, even just sitting at a doctor's office or something like that, I'll take this tiny little kit with me, right? So I can just pop it open. I've got my little palette here, and I can put my water in here, clip that on the edge, and I can do quick little sketches. And if all of a sudden somebody goes, oh, it's my turn, I'm going in to see the dentist, or I'm going in to get my car fixed, I can close that thing up, chuck the water off to the side, hopefully not on anybody. And I can close that up, and that can go in my little pack with my sketchbook right there. And I don't have all the caps all over the place, but I'm going to get a little bit more burnt umber out. And then I'm going to take another blue. I'm going to take French ultramarine. It's a warmer blue. And the reason I'm going to take this one is I want to show you how to get almost a neutral gray out of mixing this blue and this umber. So a lot of things that you can use in your palette can be made from existing colors that you have. So if you have a burnt umber, do that. We're going to get a little bit of our French ultra. I'll put that over here. Put that right there. And then I'm going to pick up some of that burnt umber, and I'm going to mix that together. And let's do a little test off to the side here. When we put that down, remember French ultramarine and burnt umber. And look at that, I get this lovely gray. If I get a little bit more umber in there, I can get more of a brownish gray. A little bit more of the ultramarine, I can get more of a bluish gray. So I have that as an option. And I am going to use that. I'm going to drop that in, since I have that mixed, right up here in my upper area. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to clean off my brush and just take some water just in between here, just in this sort of no man's land, in between the green and in between this gray I'm laying down. And that way those will sort of start to blend. And I'm just blocking in that whole area, except notice a little bit of light up here up top. So I'm going to kind of go around there and just be aware of what's happening up there.
Jimmy, we did have somebody asking about the paper that you are using.
Yeah, sure. The paper I'm using, I'll close this up and show you. The paper I'm using right here is it's the new Professional Winsor & Newton watercolor paper. And this one happens to be a block. So what we mean by a block is it's glued on all four sides. Let me raise this up for you a little bit. It's glued on all four sides except in this upper corner right here. So you can put a palette knife in there and remove that from the rest of the sheets here. But the reason I love a block, the paper, instead of having a single piece of paper that can get kind of flimsy, or if you use a lot of water, it could possibly buckle. I like that it's glued down on all four sides. I like a hard surface too. It's almost like working with a panel. And the particular one I'm using, and this is just a matter of preference, I'm using cold press. Hot press, for those of you who don't know, and I always don't like to assume that you know who we're talking to. Hot press is a very, very smooth paper, favored by a lot of people, like and not specifically, but a lot of times by illustrators, maybe botanical artists, people who want to get really tight, fine detail. The other would be rough, simply as the name would suggest, a very rough surface. And I'll show you here. Here's our hot press. So if I get hot press here in focus, notice how you can see, not the color swatches, but here if we look at the paper, you can hardly see any grain to that at all, right? It's super, super smooth, as opposed to, now watch this, cold press. There it is, cold press. Look at the difference. That's great. You can really see that right there. Difference between cold press and hot press. So you get more texture. Let's up the ante a little bit more with rough. Oh yeah, look at that. Rough is rough, right? Rough is exactly what it sounds like there. So when I put these colors down here, I've got a cadmium red which is not what we necessarily call a granulating color, or a color that has bigger pigment chunks and settles in the hollows of the paper. But we do have ultramarine, which tends to do that. So even in hot press, you can see ultramarine blue settles in the little hollows of the paper, which are really tough to see, really hard to see. Look at how more of that comes out with the hot press. You see more of the grain, and even more so here. And I actually did a little dry brush, which I like if you're trying to do anything rough. So dry brush would simply be you taking a color. I'm going to grab some of my ultramarine that I had on my palette, and I'm going to take, I favor a rag, just instead of wasting a lot of paper towels. I can just, abuse this thing for months. But I'm just going to kind of tap on that. And then I'm going to drag, right? I don't have a lot of color on there. So I can really pick up the high points there and give a sense of texture and a sense of roughness. So that's that paper that I'm using. The weight, the last thing I want to say about, I can say more about paper, you just asked. But this is 140-pound paper. Does not mean you have to lift 140 pounds in the gym to pick this up. The real simple thing, and once again, I just want to make sure that I'm talking to everybody and being super clear here. When we look at a ream of paper is 22 by 30 inches in size, 500 sheets. So a paper that's 140 pounds for 500 sheets, 22 by 30, is a certain thickness that we would call 140-pound paper. A thicker paper, same 500 sheets, same 22 by 30 size, because it's thicker, would all weigh more when you put it all together. So you might have something like a 300-pound paper. You could have something less, like a 90-pound paper. You can even have a 70-pound paper. You could have a 400-pound paper. There's lots of different options there. But a thicker paper is going to enable you to put more water into that without that sort of buckling, which looks like I'm doing some sort of movement for hand movements for a song. But it allows you to really kind of get into that a whole lot more. Let's get some more color down and keep your questions coming. I'm going to show you, let's lay down some blue. I'm going to use, because in my reference photo, because that light moves from blue to green, I'm going to use a little bit of that phthalo blue green shade, right? Again, because I'm keeping it in the feel of the mood of those. And I think if you were to look at this whole entire picture, and I said to you, tell me where you think you see warm areas of the picture. Well, I think you'd say in the taillights here, certainly here, the reflection on the surface. I think you would call a lot of this very cool, right? That's the feeling that it has. So I want to make sure I really kind of stick with that and I make sense of that. Now, one thing I want you to notice about our phthalo blue green shade and red shade, I'm using the green shade. I'm going to use very little of it. When you hear the name phthalocyanine, let's get you back down closer for this. It's a very staining color. Look, I barely have anything on there. And that's quite bold already, really bold. So I'm going to use just a little, and I'm going to feather that out. And you can see how that's making everything else around it feel a little bit more green, right? And, to get, when we're painting like this, like for me, I'm a painter who, I guess if I had to nail it down, I would call myself a representational painter, meaning I paint things to represent what they are. So this is cars on a street, in a city, in traffic, and I do that, right? I try to represent that. So hopefully when I'm done doing that, you look at it and you say, oh, yeah, that's what I see. I get that. But I like to try to do that in abstracted terms. And I like to give you guys a little bit of lessons in terminology too, especially for those of you who are newer to the art making process, because a lot of times people use the term, and I'm going to jump in while I have that. I'm going to deal with other lights, and I'm going to use that warmer scarlet right there. That's that warmer red. And I'm going to come in here. I'm actually going to take my brush. I'm just going to get it a little wet right here. I know you can't see that right there, but that's just getting a little bit wet. When people use the term abstract, sometimes a lot of times they think abstract means that I won't know what it looks like. I won't look like anything that I recognize. That's not necessarily so. An abstract, really, if you just look up the meaning of the word abstract, it means to simplify. So what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to simplify these forms right here. And if you look, we're getting the idea, starting to get the idea of a glow from those lights, but it's simplified. I don't have to give you every single bit of information. I give you enough information and it's kind of what you call in psychology gestalt, right? You'll put it together, right? Like, when we have a situation like this in the border and I do this, watch, I'll put that and I'll put that, right? And you ask tons of people what that is and they say, oh, it's a circle. It's actually not. It's two lines, right? I haven't completed it, so it's not a circle. It's actually two lines. But it's the idea that your eye will put things together. So I want to give information that'll help somebody put the rest of it together so that I can keep my drawing, I can keep my painting somewhat simple. Do we have other questions, Emmy? These people have to have questions.
There was one that was kind of a little bit more off topic, but you did have a cadmium, I believe, that you were testing on your papers.
Yeah.
And they were asking, and you had the cadmium free scarlet, but if it is a true cadmium, can you put cadmiums in your septic tank?
Oh, okay. So, all right, that's okay. Let me try to address that as simply as possible and go back to this. It is not a genuine cadmium, and that's why we call it cadmium free, right? So cadmium is a heavy metal. And it does not contain any of that. The goal with our chemists when we launched this a few years ago in 2018, was that we wanted to mimic all the things that a cadmium would do, which gives you high saturation, gives you great opacity, mimics natural light well, and grays down quite nicely, which is why the impressionists in the mid to later 1800s loved cadmiums. So we try to give you all that, but if you don't want to use cadmium, you don't have it. Now, putting it down your septic tank, I wouldn't put any of this down your septic tank. I wouldn't do that. What I would do, I'm going to duck out of the frame here. Hold on one second. I'm going to duck down here. What I would do, I know this doesn't look appealing, is this is cat litter, not used by my cats, so I want to stress that right here. What I would do is I would take my wastewater here, and this is just a clumping cat litter, and I could dump my wastewater in here when it gets too mucky, when too dirty, and that'll clump together, as you can see right here. And then I can scoop that out, and that can be gotten rid of as disposed of as solid waste. So I would avoid putting down things down your drain for the sake of the environment and the ecology. Also, if you're doing something else water-based like acrylics, I would avoid that as well, because you simply could clog up your septic system. Now, when it comes to, and I'll just address this quickly since we're on the subject, even though we're talking about watercolor, when it comes to oils and disposing of dirty turpentine mineral spirits, you want to check with your local Department of Public Works. They're all different in how they handle that. I can actually take mine to my DPW, my Department of Public Works, and they have a tank where that can go in. They also have another one for used motor oil. You got to check that with your local facilities, but try to do your best to do your part on that. That's important. You don't want that going back into the groundwater, right? Which is where we drink from and all that other stuff. Okay, let me get more color down here. And again, keep those questions coming. I'm happy to answer as much as possible.
We had another one about the pencil drawing that you have there.
Yeah.
So do you spray fix it at all before you start painting?
No. No, I don't. I'm just, for this one, I just used a little mechanical pencil with almost like a 2H piece of graphite, so it doesn't smudge a whole lot. And I do it very, very lightly. I did it a little bit. You can even see it up from here. Obviously, you can see it the closer I bring my camera in. I made it a bit darker than I normally would, just because I wanted to make sure it showed up for all of you guys through the camera. So I made it darker than I normally would. Yeah, I don't do that. And if you sprayed a fixative on here, one of the things that you might end up doing is messing up the sizing of the paper. So your watercolor paper, And remember, I told you, boy, a lot of things we could cover tonight. Your watercolor paper has a sizing. So this professional watercolor paper has sizing internally and externally. What does that mean? It means that in the process of making the paper, and sizing a lot of times would come from animal origins. This comes from a plant-based origin. But what you would do is a sizing tempers the absorbency of the paper. So I want you to think about a paper towel. Super absorbent, right? When you watch a commercial and they have a paper towel, they will make you believe it's going to suck up 18 gallons of water and everybody's happy, even though the kids spilled stuff all over the place. That doesn't have a sizing on it because you want to absorb everything. Your watercolor paper has a sizing so that the watercolor doesn't sink into it right away and not allow you to blend and make washes. There's also an external sizing, so when the paper is dry, there's another sizing on there. So it's about getting the sizing correct so that the watercolor can absorb into the paper, but not too much. You want to be able to use it. So if you put a fixative on there, you could have an issue with that. So that's kind of the bigger reason why I probably wouldn't do that. Let's go back to my overhead. And for some reason, I'm going to start, apologize for that. Some reason this rotated. So I'm going to get just a little bit wobbly as I take my phone out and make it flip back for you. So apologize for that.
Now, while you're doing that, you can probably answer this question. Would you normally be worried about the grid that you put on, or would you erase that out, or would you just leave that?
No, I can erase that after the fact. I mean, that's because I've gone so what I want to say, so light and had such a light touch with it. I could do that after the fact. I'm going to show you. I don't have a black on my palette. I don't have a black on my palette. That's not, and that is not because I have anything against black in a watercolor palette. I do not. Sometimes you will see or hear of teachers who just vehemently are opposed to it. I think that's only because people can get too heavy-handed with it. But I'm going to show you something else here because I want to lay in some of the colors for the car. So I have this color here. This is Perylene Violet. That's it right there. It looks like a black. It's this one right here. It looks like a black. Until we do this, I'm going to take my flat brush this time. I like a flat. I had a pointed round I was using before. There's Perylene Violet. Look at that. That is just a rich, deep violet that moves towards like a crimson, a maroon. And then the other one I have is a Perylene green. Okay. Again, that looks black. That looks black right there. You might go like, oh yeah, Jimmy, you have black. You do have black on your palette. No. Let's take this and put that down. And even there, it almost looks black. Let me wet a little more. Yeah, let me get the undertone. And you can see that. Very rich, deep colors. I'm going to bring these two together here. I think I got more red in here than the violet. I'm going to bring those two together. And look up there. Get myself a black. Now, if I push more green into it, I get a chromatic black. So it would have a green chroma, or what were we talking about before with the phthalo blue red shade, phthalo blue green shade. I could push a little bit more green in here and get a greenish black. I could push more of the violet in there and get more of a violet reddish black. But I think I'm going to use that right there. I think that's okay. I think there's no problem with that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to drop that in the windshield, not windshield. That's not a windshield. That's the back window of this car here. And I'm going to drop that in. And the nice thing about this is that it's not, and again, I get why people kind of freak out about black sometimes, because it can be, again, if you get too heavy with it, it can be overpowering. So I totally get it, but you shouldn't be afraid of it. And you can make a black that will work for your purposes right here. So I'm just going to get that in here. I'm going to drop that in. And that starts to really kind of form that car a little bit more. And I'm going to take my wet brush and just kind of pick up a little of that color so it's not too dark right there. And what I'm going to also do, I want to show you, some colors that I have down here. Here's another mix. This is cobalt blue deep, and brown matter. And look at that gorgeous, gorgeous violet we get. And also cobalt blue deep is, again, what we call a granulating color. Now, if you go to the Winsor and Newton website and you click on any of the watercolors, you'll see that in some, they'll have a G for something that granulates. So that leaves these grainy look here, as opposed to here's that mix of the perylene and violet and green. It doesn't granulate all that much. But the cobalt blue causes this to do it. So I like it for this road area. I think it's kind of nice for the road area to give a roughness to that. And that's cobalt blue deep and brown matter. So let's mix a little bit of that up. Here we go. Where's cobalt blue deep? There we go. Oh, here we go. Cobalt blue deep. I'm going to put on our palette right here. Now, with these brushes that I'm using while I'm mixing this, this brown matter and cobalt blue deep, as I mentioned, they're synthetic brushes. So we have a factory. I've been fortunate enough to go to it in a place called Lowestoft, England. It's a tiny little town out in the countryside, really, really beautiful. And we've got people who hand make the brushes there. And they used 13 different filaments before they came up with this I'm going to use the word formula, recipe maybe, for the filaments to create this brush. And in doing so, we don't know of anyone else who's using these particular ones on the market these days. And the reason I say that, the reason I bring that up is because when they make the brushes, what they try to do, pardon me, I lost my photo there. What they try to do is they go through the process of making the brush and make sure that it hits key characteristics that they want to have in the brush. So a brush that snaps back into place nicely, that holds its shape, that doesn't fall apart after hard use. And then when they feel like they've kind of hit that mark, then they'll send them to me and other artists in the company. And then we get to test them and say, okay, all that stuff is fine, but how do they work as an artist brush? How do they really function and work as an artist brush? And I want to show you this. Look at this immediately as I lay that in, as I start to lay that in the ground. You can see the granulation. You can see where it drops into the hollows of the paper. So it makes us feel like we have that rough texture of the road without doing much more to it. And I really quite like that. I think that's a beautiful combination. So once again, those are those two I just showed you. Really two combinations that I think a lot of times people would not think to put together to make these unique color mixes. So once again, the more you play on your palette, the more you play with color and test in your sketchbook, the more you'll get a sense of what color can do and how you can exploit your palette a little bit more. And that's why I love a sketchbook. I just, there's times when I'm starting to, I don't know, I come in my studio and, maybe, I don't know, I was reading something today online and somebody on Instagram, and they were saying, they were waiting for, to be inspired to start to do something. And I thought, it reminded me of this quote by Edward Hopper, the American painter Edward Hopper. And Hopper said, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not going to get the quote 100% right here, so you can go look it up, but he said roughly, inspiration is for amateurs, the rest of us just get to work. Now that sounds a little harsh at first, doesn't it? Inspiration is for amateurs, the rest of us get to work. Well, he was kind of sort of a bit of a gruff guy, so let's take that in context. But I still like the quote, because the way I think about it is that, we've seen art movies and things like that, or we've read stories, or maybe we've even read novels. And, we think about that moment when the artist marches into the studio and they're just overcome with this euphoria of creation. And I got to tell you, I've been doing this for a long time. I've taught people for a long time. Rarely, Emmy, you can tell me if it's different for you. Rarely is that how it is. You just need to go in and start doing something. I think about it like exercise. You could tell yourself, I'm going to go outside and run. And then you might go, oh, that feels really daunting. You know what? Go out and start walking. Take a few steps. See how you feel. And then you get into it. I think lots of things are like that. You just need to take that first sort of step forward. And then you can get going. And the reason I tell you that is because playing in your sketchbook and with color is sometimes a great way to get that inspiration flowing for you. Start to, take some color mixes that you've never made before. Because a lot of times we come in and we start using the same exact colors that we've always used and the same exact mixes. And that's okay. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, that's a horrible thing to do. No. That's not what I mean. I just mean sometimes you want to shake it up a little bit. You want to kind of push the boundaries a little bit more.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that and sentiment wholeheartedly.
Yeah,
you can't make it as an artist, as an actual, that is your career as an artist, if you don't just sit down and paint and force yourself to get through those moments where you just aren't feeling it. Because I've sat down and painted for hours and I didn't feel it, and then at the very end it started clicking, and it just takes to get in that groove kind of a moment for it to hit, but you have to kind of work through the pain.
Yeah, and isn't that the thing, Amy, that sometimes those are some of the best sessions, because all of a sudden you realize, yeah, I know for me, maybe sometimes I've gone in the studio, and by the way, this is my studio for all of you. I'm in New Jersey. This is my studio. It's behind my house, and sometimes I might come out here and I have something else going on later. I do have a time limit, and then on some of those days, it's like all of a sudden I'm going, oh man, I was supposed to be inside. My wife and I were going to go somewhere. We were going to do something, but the kids needed me or something. And I'm like, I'm here till the last minute because I got in the groove and it kicked in. So yeah, that's kind of cool. And I'm just dragging some of this scarlet red and a little bit of that Winsor yellow, that warmer yellow over here for that tail light area. And right in the middle, we get a little bit of that more bluish green that we have from the green light here coming through the middle. So I'm going to take some of that.
Now, we did have a couple of questions here. Someone was asking about what specifically makes a color be pushed more towards warm and what pushes it towards cool.
Yeah. So some, not all, but some of that has to do with just simply the natural characteristics of the pigment itself. Other things like let's say that the phthalo blue, red shade, and green shade specifically, those ones are synthesized in labs. So they're synthetic. They're what you would call, and again, because this is its own subject, but they're what you would call a synthetic organic pigment. So it has its bases in a carbon-based form. Usually, a lot of times we get some pigments from compressed flora and fauna that has been that way for millions of years. And then you get a byproduct of that is the oil industry. And from that, you can synthesize and actually make some pigments. So the chemists in the lab can push something one way or the other. Sometimes it's a heating of something. So you might have something like a burnt umber or a burnt sienna, and there's a process to that that can change. Sometimes with your cadmium colors, your cadmiums will run a range of yellows to oranges to reds, and sometimes that's the difference between the type of cadmium sulfide or cadmium selenide, and with the cadmium free pigments, it's about trying to find a pigment that mimics some of that. So really rely on the chemists a lot. And just this morning, the very first thing I did today, I was in a meeting with the chemist about a new product. Can't tell you what it is. It's a secret. But I was in there, and that's fun stuff. I gotta tell you, that's fun, geeky stuff that I like about my job. So I'm not trying to be a wise guy there that I can't tell you. I simply can't. But I love the chemist will sit there and tell me, okay, we did this and this is why it didn't work. So we went back to the drawing board and then we did this. And then that's where we got closer. And then, I'm asking questions of them and we kind of going back and forth. And it's this really kind of cool dance in making a product. And that's a lot of fun. But there's long and short of it is there's kind of a lot of different factors that can go into that. But I love that question. It's a smart question.
And somebody else was asking, what is your favorite sketchbook?
Okay, yeah, I get this a lot. So I've been using this one. I hope you guys have it. We'll see. I've been using this one, which is called Handbook. Okay. Manufactured and distributed by Global Art Materials. I happened to just come across it one day somewhere. I forget where. I like this. It's a hardcover. I like that. The size is very specific to me. If somebody bought me a gift of an 8x10 sketchbook, I'd never use it.
So is it the size or the paper?
A little bit of everything. I mean, a little bit of everything. So it's very specifically the size because I can put it in my back pocket. And I love that. So I can take my little somewhere around here. Yeah, here's my little, my little fine liner. And I can take that and I can do this, go like that. Boom, put that thing in my back pocket. Furthermore, I can take this and I have another rubber band around here somewhere. And boom, there's my little watercolor kit. If I want to get a little bit more into it, I've got this little army surplus bag and this fits right in there. And I've got a few extra brushes and a pen and a little bit of gouache too. And so that's a 3x, I think 3.5 by 5.5. So I like it for that size. And a lot of times I have people say things to me like, hey, Jimmy, I don't have enough time to work, right? Or I have a hard time working. So I think it's very important to have supplies that help you do that. So if your sketchbook is this big and that feels way daunting to you, don't have one that big. If you've got way too many supplies every time you sit down, try to narrow it, which is why I tried to share with you the suggested primary. So there's three. Want to go 6, you can go 6. Then we start adding little colors and we start adding colors based on our own personal preferences, the color palette, maybe our location, all sorts of things like that. But that is it. I go through about 3 of these a year or so. So I have stacks over the years of sketchbooks, and my sketchbook has changed over the years, but I've been using that one since I found it for 4 or 5 years now, maybe, and it suits my needs.
And we do actually carry it. Frida awesome. Did, for everyone who is watching, Frida stuck the link in the chat below, so you guys can check it out there.
Yeah, and keep in mind with that, I described to you why I like it. You think about your personality and you might go, oh, I'm similar like Jimmy about what I just said. So great, that might make sense for you. You're a totally different personality. You might go, nah, that doesn't work for me. And that's the thing both about making art and making paintings, and also the supplies that you use, is that it's very personal, very, very personal choices. So, I'm always just so, I've always told people that when you find a teacher, I think one of the important things about that is that all teachers have different styles. And the one thing I always tried to do, and certainly even try to do now, is share ideas and share concepts. And then you need to go home and think about that and see where it resonates with you and how it might make sense. I think the only thing that you ever want to be super careful of is when somebody dictates, well, you must absolutely use this and you must do that and you have to do that. It's so didactic like that. Again, this stuff is really personal, and the colors that you choose, I hope that these colors work for you. I hope they make sense, but they may also just be a starting point for you. That's real key. I want to point something out here. When I'm painting something like this, a car, because a car might seem like a difficult subject to people sometimes, but a car is really hinges upon, or at least for me anyway, it hinges upon not only the shape and everything of it, but where those wheels set up and the shadow that links all of them together underneath the car, and that little bit of light that you still get there, and that little bit of light that you still get there. Right now it's the white of the paper. I would change that as I would work on this more and more and more, but you know, that's kind of where we're at. I want to share something else about the paper too, and then we'll see if we have some other questions, because I think you can imagine, as I've said so far, you know, in talking to you for all this time, there's, gosh, a ton of information already, and again, we could keep going with this. But the paper I'm using, the importance of this is that it's and I think this is always important when you're buying paper. Everybody has a budget as artists, right? We have a budget, and I'm not telling you anything. Emmy on her episodes is not telling you anything new if we say art supplies are expensive. But I always refer to the supplies as tools. Now, I refer to the supplies as tools, and I've said this a lot in demos, I think because I grew up with a father who owned a gas station when I was a little kid. And I don't consider myself any different than a mechanic. I just think I'm a mechanic with mud. You know, colored mud. That's what I use. I use paint. It's basically colored mud. I'm using it on this cotton-based surface, this paper. In this case, though, not a natural hairbrush here, the synthetic brush, but I'm using basic supplies and basic tools. Now, if you said to me, hey, Jimmy, I would like to buy the best of everything. I can't afford the best of everything at the moment, though. Okay, fine. Here's what I would say. And once again, my thought, Emil can share hers in another episode with you, or she probably already has. Here's my thought, though. Mine only, not right or wrong, my thought. The paper is one of the most important things to me, because in oil painting or acrylic painting, the paint sits on the surface. It's not part of the surface. It's on the surface. That doesn't mean I don't want a good canvas or a good piece of linen. No, I do. But the paint sits on the surface. In watercolor, it becomes part of the surface. So there's an intimate relationship there. And if that sizing is not right, if you can't erase easily, if you can't lift color easily, if you can't make changes and mistakes without lifting the paper and getting it to pill up and tear, then it's just going to fall apart on you. And it is going to make the job that harder. Notice I said the job, not the artwork. I'm keeping it in real simple terms here, just like a mechanic. It's going to make the job harder. Next from there, even though I love color and work for a color company, the brush is important to me. And I will say this about a brush. If you've ever, I'm sure you all have, you've painted a room in an apartment or a home, what do? That's not a fun job. We don't like. We like the end result of a nice new color, but you paint the trim. Okay, great. Awesome. We got the trim, or maybe you did the base coat first of the walls, whatever. You go to do the opposite, the trim or the wall, and the brush splays out like this, and you get some of the wall paint on the trim. We just put away the trim stuff. We got to get that out and touch it up. Or the opposite happens because that brush is not holding shape. It's not the correct brush for the job. So I feel like paper and brush will really help you improve it'll help you improve your skills and not fight you as much. Now, color is super important, but with Winsor and Newton, we make our introductory range is called Cotman. They're really good colors. And I have some of them I use in the work because I like some of the particular colors. So I would just kind of look at it that way and think about paper as being really important, then brush, then color. Again, I could talk to somebody else and they go, no, I'd put it the other way. I'd put it this way. Again, and I'm not gonna fight anybody or argue on that. Again, these come to really personal preferences, but think about those concepts. Emmy, any other questions? Because I know we're getting up against the clock here.
Yes, we are. But we do have, we can go over a little bit. It's not a big deal, especially because people have questions. And if you have time.
No. Yeah, I'm here for you guys. So it's your time.
So someone was asking about when we're talking about cadmiums and making sure that it doesn't end up back in our water system. and you showed how you dump the water in the cat litter and cleaned off your brushes within that water. But when you go to actually clean your brushes,
Yeah.
do you would you avoid that not being in your sink or?
So I mean, I would say two things about that, and I'll flip this back overhead. I find a great deal. Like, this looks really gross. This is just, this is just it's just a black bean can. And I have another, like a tuna can in there that's got holes in it. That's my little brush cleaner. And this looks muddy. Once I dump that out, I can put some more clean water in here and really swish my brush around in clean water. I could dump that out again if I wanted. And pretty much just with water, I can do that. My brush will be fine. I barely need, with watercolor, because it is so soluble in water, rarely need to use soap and do that. With maybe some of your more staining colors, but I'm always an advocate of, no matter what, whether it's watercolor, whether it's oil, acrylic, get as much off of the brush as you possibly can. And with your water-based colors, that's much easier to do. But you will find that barely anything will be left if you really swish around in another container of clean water.
Very cool. Thank you so much for clearing that up. Now, somebody was asking, as far as when you do sketches for your watercolors, what kind of a pencil do you prefer?
Yeah, a lot of times I don't get heavily into, so there's two things. I'll show you a close up of this. Sometimes I actually use, we have Winsor Newton, we have fine liners. So sometimes I actually use fine liners. I might use a little bit of a pencil too, but I tend to use just either this little mechanical pencil, or I'll use sometimes like a 2H. I don't want anything like like in the B's, which are softer, which is always strange for everybody. The B is really blackness. You would think it should be H for hard and S for soft, but it's B for blackness. So I try to use not use anything that smudges a lot. This is a watercolor where you can see, if I get tight, all that line work is actually fine liner. And then the very opaque background is gouache, which is your opaque cousin to watercolor. So either the fine liner or that. And you can see actually in this, you can see a little bit of that too. Not as much fine liner, sort of as accents here. And in this one, you can see heavy duty here. This was really more of an illustration for an ad when we came out with our fine liners. And it was, again, based on a photo that my wife took on the Amalfi Coast there. So this is really heavily with with fine liners, and then your watercolor is more your accents there. And again, a little bit more of an illustration.
Those are incredible.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Are gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know we are about out of time though, and I know there are probably a couple more questions that we might have missed, and we can definitely go back through the questions on the Facebook page and answer them in writing, and we'll be able to do that as well. But I think we're gonna have to call it for the rest of the night.
Yeah. Let me say this. I mean, any questions that people have come in, please, of course, reach out to me. I'd love to really be able to feedback and answer them all for everybody. As I started off saying with this, it's a big topic. It's a big topic. There's so much, and I want you to all kind of just take this away from it. And I go back to my college teaching experience, and that is that, if somebody was working on this in a college class, you'd probably have 2 classes a week, 3 hours, a session, 6 hours, 15 weeks, which all in all seems like a long time. But if you do the math, we still only come out to about 40 hours, almost like a work week. So the time that we put in as artists goes beyond a class. It certainly goes beyond a session like this. I hope you take some of this and you implement it. And most of all, I hope you just find ways to limit your supplies enough to the things you need, so that you go do it and you don't sort of handcuff yourself by, sometimes we get paralyzed with fear, and we feel like, oh, we're going to make mistakes. That's why, again, I am such an advocate of sketchbooks. It can be your own place to do your own thing. So do not beat yourself up. Enjoy the process.
Yes, definitely. So let me change the view here so you guys can see us. So I just want to say thank you again so much for being on. It was an incredible show. Everyone in the comments were just in awe the entire time. They loved the color mixing. They loved your brush strokes.
That's
It was an
kind.
incredible class. And I just thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, no, this is always my pleasure. This is where I get to be in my wheelhouse and talk about art and supply. I mean, please, this is all my pleasure.
I think
Thank you
we
so
both
much,
nerd
everyone.
out on art supplies.
Yeah, right. All right,
It's a good
everybody,
thing.
be well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. And everybody, make sure to join me next week because it is our official 200th episode. And I'm going to be doing a mystery box. So I have no idea what supplies are in that box, but I have to create a piece of artwork with whatever the crew gave me. And
Oh,
Katie was asked about it earlier, so I am a little worried.
good luck.
She's also giving me a face right now, so I'm just like, it'll be fun. But that I believe was all of our time, and that was Jerry's Live, guys. Thank you so much for joining me, and we will see you next week.
Bye, everybody. Cheers.
Adios.